Torah TV. The world is thinking.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California. You can find the club on the internet at commonwealthclub.org. I'm Jonathan Curiel and I'll be moderating tonight's program. It's now my pleasure to introduce our very special guest, Reza Aslan, an internationally acclaimed writer and scholar of religions. He's a fellow at the University of Southern California's Center on Public Diplomacy and a Middle East analyst for CBS News. Reza has degrees in religions from Santa Clara University, Harvard University, and the University of California, Santa Barbara, as well as a Master of Fine Arts from the University of Iowa. Reza Aslan's first book is the New York Times bestselling No God But God, The Origins, Evolution, and Future of Islam, and it's been translated into 13 languages, also shortlisted for the Guardian First Book Award in the UK, and nominated for a PEN USA Award for research nonfiction. His latest book, How to Win a Cosmic War, was published by Random House in April. Reza is co-founder and creative director of Boom Gen Studios, a hub for creative content from and about the Middle East, as well as editorial executive of Mecca.com, an online community for Muslim youth. Born in Iran, he now lives in Los Angeles, where he is assistant professor of creative writing at the University of California, Riverside. Please welcome Reza Aslan. Now, Reza, you've written widely about Islam and the Middle East and so forth, but I'd like to begin our conversation this way. Tonight in Washington, President Obama is having an iftar dinner celebrating Ramadan, and he's invited a select group of Muslim Americans as well as non-Muslims. Now, Mr. Obama, during his campaign, his father, of course, was Muslim. In a sense, a lot of Muslims were disappointed that he distanced himself from his Islamic background, and yet as soon as he became president, he embraced that, it seemed, in public. What does President Obama's election and his sitting in the White House, what does that say about the state of Muslim Americans, Islam in America, and any other subject you might wish to address?
Well, all right, that's a good start. I suppose it is significant to have a secret Muslim in the White House, certainly. And so that means something, I'm sure. Well, I think the election of Barack Obama has a lot more to do with the nature of the demographic shifts that are taking place in the United States, as the Census Department has noted. We are fast approaching a period in which we will be a majority-minority country, which, as far as I know, I don't think any nation-state can boast of, certainly not in modern history. And so, in a sense, there's something very unique about the election of Obama because it represents where the nation is going as a whole. I think that his background and the fact that he did have a Muslim father what had to have been, in one way or another, I think, diminished during the campaign, because the fact of the matter is that the United States, for all of its pride in its diversity and the history of immigration that we have in this country and the melting pot status that we wear on our sleeves, is still a country that is still very nervous about other religions, certainly, other cultures, ethnicities, in particular Islam. Just about a year ago, the Washington Post, ABC News, released a poll that showed that 50% of Americans still hold negative views about Islam. About a third of Americans believe that there is essentially no such thing as a moderate Muslim, that Islam equals violence, fundamentalism, terrorism. What was really shocking about this poll is that it had essentially been unchanged since 2002, the first time that the Washington Post conducted a similar survey. So, in a sense, it seems as though opinions about Islam and about Muslims haven't changed all that much in this country. And there were I think, some very interesting, embarrassing moments during the campaign in which Obama was forced to distance himself, as you say, from his Muslim roots. But I think that now that he's president and the mandate that put him into that office has given them the freedom to, I think, be a little bit more expressive of it, certainly when it comes to foreign policy. I mean, you go back to the historic speech in Cairo, the so-called address to the Muslim world, in which he spent a good deal of time talking about his biography, and the fact that he has used that biography deliberately to push back against the attacks from jihadist ideologues like Osama bin Laden or Ayman Zawahiri. He can say with confidence that his father was a Muslim. He has Muslims in his family. He spent a significant time in a Muslim household. He knows what Islam is. He's no longer going to be trapped by that same religiously polarizing rhetoric that the Bush administration used to such effect. And that in some ways has really silenced the ideologues, the jihadist ideologues. They don't know how to respond to an American president named Barack Hussein Obama.
Right. And in fact, the Muslim world has embraced his presidency, maybe even reluctantly, because the subject of Israel-Palestine always comes up, and a lot of Muslims say, well, he may be this, but then what about that? But can you talk about the fact that around the world, Muslims look at the United States differently, and if indeed Muslim Americans look at themselves differently with someone like Barack Hussein Obama in the White House?
They certainly look at the United States differently. I was in Turkey when Obama visited the Turkish parliament, and he made a historic address where he talked about the Turkish-American relations and really tried to create a new narrative of the framework of relations between the United States and the so-called Muslim world. I'll just keep saying so-called in that because there's really no such thing as the Muslim world. I don't really know what that phrase means. But the point, I think, however, is that it's also reframed the perceptions that Muslims around the world have not just about America and American foreign policy and American government, etc., but about American Muslims. The fact of the matter is that Muslims in the United States live very privileged lives. There are about 8 million Muslims in America, according to the State Department. It's the largest non-Christian religion in the United States. It's one of the fastest growing religions in America. It's also an incredibly wealthy community. About 60% of Muslims in the United States own their own homes. The median income for a Muslim household in America is larger than for a non-Muslim household. Enormous literacy rates, very high education rates. And so, in a sense, I think it's the socio-political status of Muslims in the United States, not so much their religion, but their landscape, the context in which they live, that has in some ways alienated them, especially from their co-religionists in the Middle East, which tend to be a bit poorer, tend to live in not as advantageous situations, and most especially with their co-religionists in Europe, who tend to deal with a much less inviting, much more Islamophobic landscape than we see even here in the United States.